Welcome to this introduction training session of the UK Habitat Classification System for identifying a wide and detailed range of habitats across the United Kingdom. I'm Chris Talbot, previously the Habitat Biodiversity Officer for Warwickshire Habitat Biodiversity Audit at Warwickshire Wildlife Trust, and now Senior Ecologist at AI, an artificial intelligence and remote sensing company developing an intelligent sustainable management system that uses the UK habitat classification for biodiversity net gain and natural capital accounting. The UK habitat classification system is designed to integrate with other habitat classification systems, including the Phase 1 Habitat Survey, the Farm Environment Plan, which is used for the application of farm environment stewardship schemes, and the National Vegetation Classification Scheme. It is also designed to be integrated with ecosystem services metrics, including, for example, carbon capture, soil condition assessment, and flood risk. Other applications of the UK habitat are for measuring and monitoring habitat change, and it is the standard classification scheme that is used for the biodiversity net gain calculation. The scheme itself is designed for digital mapping using geographical information systems. And it will incorporate mapping derived from remote sensing as well as field surveys. The scheme itself can be used by experienced ecologists or for non-professional volunteers for science projects. Parts: a hierarchical set of primary habitat codes and a list of approximately 300 secondary codes. Secondary codes are used to replace the writing of repetitive descriptions, or for example the target notes used in the Phase 1 Habitat Survey. These secondary codes can be mandatory or discretionary depending on the survey level requirements. For example, there are secondary codes for management or relating specifically to urban environments. And then the UK Habitat comes in two editions, the Basic Edition and the Professional Edition. And for the purpose of the training session, we will be using the basic version. So this slide shows the hierarchical level of the UK Habitat Basic Edition. As you can see, there's level 1 terrestrial, level 2 goes down to woodland, grassland, and so on. Level 3 then splits down the categories into a bit more detail, and then level 4 further detail, and then eventually to level 5. Here is an example of how the levels for the woodlands divide down from level 1 to level 4. So you can see how the categories are split into different types of woodlands, and this applies to all the other habitat categories. This slide just really illustrates the level of detail and complexity that you would go down to using the Professional Edition. So you won't be able to actually read this very well, but it just illustrates how detailed the surveying system can be. Before taking a habitat survey, you need to be clear on the purpose of the survey, and this determines what habitats to be recorded and at what level of detail. So for example, Gorket Hill will be a training session. We assume the basic habitat survey method for training purposes. Setting the minimum mapping unit is important in order not to try and survey too much or too little, and to keep the survey in the scope of what is required. The UK Habitat recommends a minimum mapping unit of 25 by 25 square metres for urban areas or for very detailed surveys, and a much larger 2500 by 2500 square metre minimum mapping unit area for landscape size areas. There's no specific set minimum mapping unit, and any size area can be used according to the surveyor preference. But any parcel of land that is less than the minimum mapping unit must be incorporated into the larger surrounding parcel. That's one of the rules of the system. Checking the survey prior to visiting the site using desk resources, including, for example, any previous site reports, background maps, permissions, boundaries, maps, is always recommended, so as not to discover any unexpected consequences and to go out prepared for what you're going to survey. Supporting maps of the site, including a base map showing maybe the footpaths, roads and access points, as well as any aerial imagery or other report maps that you can find, should be obtained before going out. And the metadata is the information about the survey itself. That includes things such as the purpose of the survey, the date of the survey, the surveyors who are carrying out the work, and the level of the survey, and including things like the minimum mapping unit. Here are a set of examples of landscape areas that have been coded using the UK habitat method. And this is an example here of open mosaic habitats on previously developed land, which includes post-industrial sites such as reclaimed quarries, dismantled railway lines, etc. And as you can see, the primary habitat is U for urban, for built-up areas and gardens at level 2, and level 3, and it's an open mosaic habitat on previously developed land. The secondary codes include number 10, scattered scrub, 132, nutrient poor substrates, and 148, flower forage abundant. And then the complete code is shown at the bottom. Arable landscape. This is for cropland, so the primary habitat is the field, and the coding is C for cropland, C1 for arable and horticulture, C1C, cereal crops, and there's also a primary habitat, a hedgerow here, which is coded as H2, and then H2 for other hedgerows. H2A would be a species-rich hedgerow. And then there are some secondary codes applied. 69 is fence around it, and 75 it's being actively managed. And then the complete code is shown at the bottom. So here is an example of a primary woodland habitat. W for woodland and forest, W1 broadleaf mixed and new woodland, W1F it's a lowland mixed deciduous woodland, and then W1F7 for level 5 and other lowland mixed deciduous woodland, with a set of secondary codes all listed below, and then the complete code exactly shown as you would map it out. And example 4 is a grassland, an Annex 1, which is a priority grassland. Primary habitat G for grassland, G2 for a calcareous grassland, G2A for a lowland calcareous grassland, and then a G2A6 for level 5 semi-natural dry grasslands and scrubland faces on a calcareous shrubland. It's an important orchid site with a list of secondary codes shown below, and then the complete code is at the bottom. Here are some examples of map work that I've done using the UK Habitat Code. So the first example is Priory Fields Local Wildlife Site. It's a phase 1 field survey, hand drawn, and note the labelling. Map 2 is an example of the Priory Fields, again local wildlife site, but this time using the UK Habitat Field Survey, mapped from a GIS system with no labels. And finally, map 3 is the Long Marston phase 1 habitat code conversion to a UK habitat. Finally, map 4, Brandon Marsh Sheepfield local wildlife site. This was UK habitat classification using a combination of remote sensing and a field survey to verify the results of the remote sensing. So the first example here is the typical phase 1 hand-drawn map using the phase 1 codes with a set of annotations. Again, primary fields using this time the UK habitat classification, and you can see it's a much more simplified map. There's no annotation. There would be a set of codes with these as well, and this is all done through the GIS system. This is the example of Long Marston, originally mapped at phase 1 habitat, and then using the code conversion to a UK habitat classification. And basically what you've got is a more detailed account of the land use, including urban areas, which you would not get on a phase 1 habitat map. So the final mapped example here of UK habitat mapping is Brandon Marsh Sheepfield, local wildlife site that has deteriorated through neglect and has become scrubbed over considerably. And the scrub area was identified using the remote sensing imagery and then a field visit just to confirm what had been identified. It would have been quite difficult to actually determine the extent of the encroachment without being able to use the UK habitat classification scheme mapped with remote sensing. The UK habitat classification is developed into a well-resourced system managed and run by a group of ecological consultants at eCountability. I'd recommend visiting their website to get a full description of the UK habitat system and the resources available on their site. In addition to the information on the website, they've produced a downloadable mappable app for mobile phones and tablets, which allows you to search by keyword or species, and it helps the complete UK reference guide. And when you look at the reference guide, you will see how extensive it is. It contains a lot of information. The practical field visit will take place at the Heart of England Forest site at Gorket Hill. Details of the site, including location, access, survey forms, notes and maps, as well as the UK Habitat Guide for the day, will be made available to you by the Heart of England Forest team. The other items you may want to bring yourself are field guides such as Wildflower Keys, Francis Rose or Harrop's Wildflower Guides, Collins' Complete Guide to British Wildflowers, or any of the Field Studies Council guides to grasses, wildflowers, etc. It would also be useful to have a hand lens, and if you would like, binoculars and food and drink or whatever else you think you require on the day. So the aim for the day is to get an understanding of how to record using the UK habitat classification method of habitat surveying. We'll be using the basic edition, and you should be comfortable with level 3, but with the option of trying to level 4. Level 5, if you'd like to go a bit further, is purely admissible. There is no expectation of knowing how to identify many different plants because the survey is in May. A number of flowering plants, including grasses, will be limited. The woodlands will probably be much better this time of year. The basic rule of thumb is to survey woodlands in the spring, grasslands late spring to mid-summer, and wetlands into the early autumn. For the exercise on the day, I've suggested a minimum mapping unit of 25 by 25 square meters because of the time available. There will be some secondary codes which will be optional and be worth trying those out to understand how they can be used and applied in the method. There are no mixed or mosaic habitat types, so you will need to select the habitat boundaries and define them as a single distinct habitat type. The guide recommended to identifying a habitat is 75% or more of one habitat type. This will be explained more on the day. If in doubt or you'd like to add notes to your survey, please do so. There will be forms available, and it's good practice to identify any interesting plants or animals and to take notes just as guides, and to photograph any identifier plants or for checking at home and recording and just seeing what the actual habitat looks like as a memory aid. I look forward to meeting you on the day and undertaking the survey with you all. All the information, as I said, will be provided that you need for the day for identifying the habitats with reference material. Please ensure you bring your own personal equipment, suitable clothing, etc. And look forward to seeing you on the day. Thank you very much.